Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. The Prince and Princess of Wales break their silence on the latest revelations from the Epstein files. Tech giants attend a landmark social media trial over addiction claims. And the Seattle Seahawks win this year's Super Bowl as Puerto Rican star Bad Bunny performs a historic halftime show entirely in Spanish. The Prince and Princess of Wales have said they are deeply concerned by the continuing revelations regarding Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in the Epstein files, but say their thoughts remain focused on the victims. The update was made by a Kensington Palace spokesperson ahead of the Prince of Wales' trip to Saudi Arabia this week. It comes as Ghislaine Maxwell is set to be questioned by US Congress as part of an expanding probe into Jeffrey Epstein's network. For more on this, I'm joined by British royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. So one thing I found interesting, King Charles visited Lancashire today. Prince William has landed in Saudi Arabia. We know he's in the country for 3 days. It seems to be business as usual for the royal family.
One has to bear in mind royal dowries are planned months often in advance. That hasn't been easy with the King and the Princess of Wales battling cancer. The Princess is fortunately in remission and the King's health is improving, we understand. But nonetheless, the importance, for example, of a state visit or a visit, this is very significant to Saudi Arabia, for example. With Prince William, he's done somewhat of a diplomat. Remember his 2018 visit to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, or indeed last year to the reopening of Notre Dame, where he met with President Trump, and then that led to a second state visit. I mean, this is most important, and especially the Saudi Arabian visit, where he'll meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and also they'll be commemorating almost a centenary of relations between the two countries with investment, trade, sustainability, and also goodwill.
And the royal family's motto is never complain, never explain. The Prince and Princess of Wales have released a statement regarding Andrew and his links to Epstein. In the ever-changing media landscape, how important is transparency from the royal family?
Well, clearly the never explain, never complain, that was identified most particularly with Queen Elizabeth, whose 7 decades on the throne were truly remarkable. But, of course, changes in styles, changes in attitudes and so forth. It clearly to be seen to be as transparent as possible, it is certainly beneficial, especially in today's world, where, of course, communications have changed so drastically. But the statement that the Prince and Princess of Wales put out, I mean, the reason this is so important is it continues the royal families, the press release from the King and Queen, for example, which emphasizes the importance of the sympathy with the victims of the deceased paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The fact the King's brother has faced a large number of accusations, all of which he has denied, and he's not been found guilty of anything. But the facts are that in the eye of the British public, his support is down 6%, and the accusations, some of them backed up with recent evidence, are very, very unpleasant and undesirable. One of the problems with the palace and the way royals respond to, for example, something like this, the difficulty is that they don't know what's coming out because the Epstein Epstein files which have come out of Congress. Some are still redacted, some are yet to come, and it's impossible. For example, there are numerous security considerations, and the police are currently, they're assessing whether or not, when he was Special Representative for British Trade, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who was then Prince Andrew, when he leaked sensitive information to paedophile Epstein.
The plot does seem to thicken every time we do get some new revelations from the Epstein files. But Richard, in your opinion, should King Charles make a statement and apologise to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein?
You're absolutely right that our thoughts and the emphasis must be with the victims, but there would be a problem. Firstly, the king is the fountain of justice, and if he were to make a statement and apologize, basically, this is quite possible. Police investigations might, for example, lead to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he is now, going on trial. Now, that would prejudice the result of any trial if the head of the judicial system had made an apology. The other problem would be it would open the royal family up to reparations. There are over 1,000, according to reports, victims or survivors, as they call themselves, of Epstein. And the third difficulty is that it would link the royal family forever with one of the most ghastly and obscene rings that have ever, it would appear, existed. A difficulty is also from a security point of view. There are numerous reports that Epstein may have been a Russian spy, and also Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's had connections with individuals who've been assumed to be or considered by the state to be Chinese spies, undesirable individuals from Tunisia and Libya and so forth. It's a ghastly tale, and also, of course, one with considerable political ramifications, as you note, in the recent week.
Yeah, absolutely. Political ramifications, and we're seeing the fallout of that right now when it comes to Keir Starmer's cabinet over in the UK. But you just actually touched on this for me. Police are assessing right now new claims that Andrew sent confidential reports to Epstein. How damaging are these further revelations for the royal family and for Andrew himself? Because you said it's absolutely ghastly. Many people would agree. Can the royal family stick together and survive this?
The royal family go back over 1,000 years, and I am sure that they will survive it. But what unquestionably, it's, as I say, very, very difficult to respond when you don't know what the next horror might well be. But certainly the fact that, there's a threatened civil case in the United States that may be launched against Andrew, who paid £12 million to settle a civil suit without, this was from Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who's tragically committed suicide last year. The facts were she accused him of sexual abuse. There are also reports, Thames Valley Police are looking into an accusation that Epstein flew in a woman to be with Andrew at Royal Lodge. And we also don't know what else is coming and what has been redacted too, and what may subsequently appear. So it's very difficult for the royal family, and also at a period when they are doing so much positive work, and also a trip, for example, like Prince William in Saudi Arabia, you would expect that to get maximum publicity. It's subsumed under a mountain of sleaze politically, which has affected Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the disgraced former ambassador to the United States. But the most important British diplomatic post that there is, Peter Mandelson, and also, as I say, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's moved out of his house, which was Royal Lodge in Windsor, to Sandringham, but he may well find that all of this, including the accusations against his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who you showed in that clip. There's little doubt that she is the height of entitlement and greed from everything we've been learning.
And a little bit earlier, I did see King Charles went to Lancashire, and there was actually quite an outpouring of support when he went around to meet and greet the people who were waiting to, of course, get a glimpse of King Charles. But what do the British public think of all of this right now?
I think that firstly, we're at a very difficult point politically where the two major parties have minimal support. The royal family's support is something around 60%, which is much less than in Queen Elizabeth's time, which it was well over 70, but nonetheless considerable. Republican support remains small. But support for Prince Andrew, the public have never believed the fact that he claimed a photograph of him with Virginia Giuffre, which has been substantiated by, apparently, a document written by Ghislaine Maxwell, Maxwell's madam, who ran a lot of his, or appears to have run a lot of his sleazy business. And that image has haunted him. He also, in 2019, the public were absolutely, they couldn't believe. Andrew gave an interview for Newsnight at BBC at Buckingham Palace and made some extraordinary claims. That couldn't, a lot of what he said was clearly lies. It couldn't be proven to be at that time. But email after email has proved a great deal of what he said and what his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson has claimed simply isn't true. So where things move on legally is a huge question mark. The public, I think, absolutely appalled by it all. And it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, you are right. That Newsnight interview that Andrew did, as you say, it was an extraordinary time. But Richard Fitzwilliams, it was brilliant to have your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We can now go to Paul Sinclair, political aide to former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown in number 10. Paul, brilliant to have you on the show, obviously speaking about Epstein a little bit earlier to your interview and links to Andrew. But let's focus a little bit in on Keir Starmer, because he's lost his 2 aides in just 24 hours. The Scottish Labour leader is calling for him to quit. The Prime Minister says he's not going to resign. But can he continue in the job?
He is in a very difficult position, and I won't deny that. But at the same time, I think Anna Sarwar, who's a dear friend of mine, who's the Scottish Labour leader, who's called for him to quit, was possibly misadvised in doing so, because there are a couple of problems here. One, it's very difficult to see who would replace who would replace Keir Starmer as the leader. And the other problem is that at the moment, what question is answered by replacing Starmer? And I don't think there is one. I don't think there is somebody else who's out there who could possibly do it. I think he has got enormous problems. I mean, what has happened with Peter Mandelson has been disgusting. I worked with Peter Mandelson. I know Peter Mandelson, but nobody knew the extent to which he would of his malfeasance. So therefore, I don't think if there was an easy answer in that basically let's just change the leader, I think we would do that. But I don't think there is an easy answer.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? There's no easy answer, but Andy Burnham couldn't run in the by-election. Maybe Keir Starmer stopped that because he knew something that we don't know. But Paul, my big question is, lots of people are coming out today. Yes, Anna Sarwar's come out. He says, you know, it's a hard decision for him. Starmer was a great friend, but things are just not going quite to plan, which is quite clear to see. We've also heard from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, talking about Labour in a psychodrama. But my big question to you is Starmer's right-hand man, who is, of course, Morgan McSweeney, just the scapegoat right now in the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador. Because let's be honest, between you and me, the final decision would have been with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and this was a bad judgment from him. And he seems to not always make the right decision.
It was a bad judgment by him, but one of the things I would say, since we're just speaking privately between you and me, having been an advisor number 10 to more than one prime minister, one of the things I think has been disappointing in Britain in the last couple of years is we've had the rise of the super advisor. And the super advisor is, Dominic Cummings under Boris Johnson and Morgan McSweeney, who have done more to promote themselves than necessarily their cause. Now, the fact of the matter is, yes, of course, Peter Mandelson was a mistake. And I do believe it is correct that Morgan McSweeney has gone. But as somebody who is an advisor and was very proud to be an advisor, you have to get a team together that supports the principle. Now, you can question whether Keir Starmer is good enough to be Prime Minister. But I tell you what, he is good enough to be supported. And I don't think he's been supported well enough by the people who are prepared to take the shilling to do that job.
So I guess the argument is he hasn't been supported because he hasn't always made the right decisions. There's been so many U-turns since Keir Starmer entered number 10, and that's something that a lot of people are saying. It's clear there's been cracks in this party from the very beginning, 18 months in. Don't forget, we also had Sue Gray. Now we have Morgan McSweeney. So, he's not doing well when it comes to AIDS, let's put it that way. But another question I wanted to put to you is, you mentioned this to me, Paul, that you actually knew Peter Mandelson. Of course, he was appointed US ambassador. At the time, he was a controversial appointment. But what kind of guy was he like to work for or to know?
He was a very bad appointment. Peter Mandelson is a man who falls in love with influence and money very easily, and that is what has been his downfall. At the same time, he has an intellect that is certainly worth having on board. But when you come to the point, and we talk about the thing that you touched about Keir Starmer not being very well served by the people. You're a wonderful presenter, if I may say so, but you're there because of a great number of wonderful people behind you in a production team. Now, the problem that Keir Starmer has is he doesn't have quite the right production team. And I think if he did have a better production team, he would appear to be a better Prime Minister.
I just want to say, you're absolutely right, Paul. I have the best production team. And if Keir Starmer had my production team, he might still be running the country. But that's not the story right now when it comes to him. But, Paul, my big question really to you is, what does Keir Starmer need to say to MPs tonight to make it clear he has a steady hand at the helm of a ship? Because from the outside, many people might say it feels like that is just not the case.
Here's what he needs to do. And I remember it when I worked for Gordon Brown, who I think was an absolutely brilliant Prime Minister in very difficult circumstances. And it is to stop playing the political game, to stop kind of looking at the odds and just do the right thing. I think what people need to know in the Labour Party and what people need to know in the country is they need to be reminded of what the Labour Party is about what its values are. And it is not actually about supporting a leader, come or go. It's about supporting the values. And that's what he needs to do. People don't like Keir Starmer. I don't think Keir Starmer will particularly ever be likeable. But we can like what he stands for if he explains it.
So Starmer's been in power for 18 months. We've seen a number of U-turns from his Labour government. And now we're seeing these resignations. Is the Prime Minister fatally wounded? And are they just bandaging him up to survive the next election and by-election that's set to come?
I have said this on more than one occasion, that there are a finite number of times in which Number 10 can reinvent itself. And I do think he might have run out of those times. But I have to say, and I go back to what is better next. We need to get back to, it needs to be not just a politics of personalities. It needs to be a politics of principle. It needs to be a politics of policy, of what we want to achieve. Now, if you are saying to me, do I think that Keir Starmer will lead the Labour Party into the next election? Hand on heart, no, I don't believe so. Do I believe he still has a part to serve? Yes, I do. And I think he can do it by setting out. I mean, he's got the most appalling job and the most wonderful job on earth, and that is to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What he now needs to do is not work or in terms of how do I eke out more time, is how he spends the time. Because if he spends the time well, the time will extend.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Gordon and Denton by-election that's upcoming at the end of this month. But I just want to move on to one final thought from you, if I can, Paul. What should Mandelson do now? What's his next step as all these revelations come out about him?
Prepare for jail.
OK. So Mandelson should prepare for jail. And do you think that as the more revelations come up from the Epstein files, that's where he's going to end up?
I suspect so. I think the one thing, Peter Mandelson has done many good things for the Labour Party, but the best thing he can do now is just us draw a line under him. I think what he's done, people are comparing it to tragedies of the past. He's basically on the same level in my mind to Kim Philby, although at least Kim Philby, the spy, believed in something. It's time that he moved on, and it's time that British politics moved on from Peter Mandelson.
Paul Sinclair, it's been brilliant to have you on. I've really enjoyed your analysis. Thank you for your time.
Lovely to speak to you.
The arguments in a landmark social media trial have started today when some of the world's biggest companies are being accused of making products that are intentionally addictive and harmful to young people. Meta co-founder and chief executive Mark Zuckerberg, along with the bosses of Instagram and YouTube, are expected to be called as witnesses during the trial. For more on this, I'm joined by Rebecca Hudson, editor-in-chief of the News Movement. Rebecca, great to have you on the show with me today. So social media is on trial in LA. Over the years, people have tried to sue the owners of Facebook, YouTube, TikTok and Snapchat, but they've all failed, most of them. It's been very difficult. What makes this court case different?
Yeah, I mean, this is truly exceptional, kind of what's happening over in LA at the moment. So like you say, lots of families, campaign groups, individuals have tried to take these huge social media platforms to court before, for creating harmful content, for the impact that it has on kind of our real world lives. But today we're seeing the beginning of this landmark trial, which is really different because firstly, it's going to appear in front of a jury. None of these platforms ever been subject to trial by jury. And we're going to hear from 1,500 plaintiffs, which is kind of staggering when you think about the volume of cases that really entails. And the idea being that this is going to set, these are kind of called bellwether trials, which will set legal precedent for other court cases that could follow a sort of a similar theme. And what's interesting here is that today they're not being accused of harmful content. They're being accused of creating environments and platforms that are addictive and deliberately harmful to young people. So Previously, these platforms have been kind of hauled into courtrooms for publishing damaging content, for not moderating content effectively. But today it's actually looking at how these platforms operate. So things that you and I are really used to, so the infinite scroll, being able to like, being able to comment, all those behaviors that keep us on the platforms, that is what's on trial today.
And for the first time, as you did just say to me, Rebecca, social media companies are on trial. They will be facing trial by jury. So what will the big companies' main defense argument actually be?
So previously, when they've been sort of taken to court, they've been able to hide under a kind of subsection of the Communications Act in the US, which is typically where these cases are heard, which protects parties from publishing content, as part of, the freedom of speech amendment, and, the ability for these platforms to publish what they want. So that's kind of how it's sort of historically kind of operated. But in this instance, they might have to now change how they operate. So potentially change their functionality, pay a fine, and also, this sets a legal precedent for other cases to be brought against them. And the typical defences we hear, are that they go to great efforts to keep their user bases safe, that there's no correlation between the platforms that they run and the consequences in the real world. But all of those are going to be put to test, today and over the coming weeks. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how the jury responds to those arguments when they are faced with 1,500 plaintiffs, all talking about how these platforms have negatively impacted the lives of young people.
And if the jurors decide the tech companies are harmful and addictive by design, will this change the way that we live online? You mentioned the scrolling earlier. We can just scroll for hours and hours and hours, and there seems to be no cutoff point. What changes could possibly come?
Yeah, I think that's why this is so landmark, is that this could literally change how you and I use Instagram. It could change how you and I use TikTok. It might be that they have to regulate how long people use the platforms for. It might be that certain things are removed, so we can't comment on strangers' posts. It might be that likes and dislikes and all that kind of functionality and iconography is removed. Anything that could be claimed, has an impact on how people feel and is harmful and is addictive. So this could be hugely significant for sort of how technology operates. And of course, if they make the changes in California, the likelihood is that they'd be rolled out for users across the world. So although this is happening in LA, the whole world should be watching, because the consequences of this trial could impact us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also seen the likes of social media bans in Australia for under 16s, which has been something that other countries are also considering as people think about protecting children online. It's becoming a big talking point. But Rebecca, what happens right now if the social media companies lose? How much do they have to pay out? And what reputational damage could this possibly have?
Yeah, so we're talking about kind of an uncapped payout depending on what these platforms are found guilty of. But you can imagine if it is proven that there is a correlation between people committing real life harm to themselves, taking their own lives, ending up with sort of disorders, eating disorders, etc. You can imagine that would be sort of hugely significant in terms of compensation, and likely looking at it being a percentage of the profits of these companies. So, you and I both know how much they rake in from advertising, from data, from all that stuff. We're talking about potentially billions of dollars being paid out. And reputationally, like you say, we've got countries around the world, discussing whether we should be banning social media for under 16s. You talk about in Australia, in the UK, where I am today, it's a very live topic of conversation. And you can imagine other countries following suit. So reputationally, I think this court case is already a bit of a nightmare for these brands, because it's got us all talking once again about how these platforms operate and whether they have our best interests at heart.
Yeah, Rebecca Hudson, great conversation. Thank you. As you say, hot topic at the moment. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Now, in Japan, messages of congratulations from around the world have been pouring in for Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi and her governing coalition following a big win in the country's general election. The landslide victory paves the way for her proactive fiscal policy and overhaul of Japan's defense capabilities aimed at countering China's military assertiveness. Chris Gilbert reports.
It was a stunning result for Japan's governing coalition, riding on the back of Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's sky-high popularity ratings. The win caps a remarkable turnaround for Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party, following consecutive drubbings in national elections over the past 2 years. US President Donald Trump took to the platform X to congratulate Japan's leader, wishing her a success in passing her conservative, peace through strength agenda. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also hailed the win.
And boy, has she had a big victory today. She's going to have 2/3 majority in the upper house. President Trump endorsed her last week. She is a great ally, great relationship with the president. And when Japan is strong, the U.S. is strong in Asia.
Japanese stocks rose at the start of the week following Takaichi's win. Her proactive fiscal policy, emphasizing large-scale strategic investment, lifted investors' moods. The margin of victory gives the governing coalition a strong mandate to push through its policies.
The opposition parties have lost a large number of seats, so in that sense, it may make it easier for things to move forward. But at the same time, if an atmosphere emerges in which people feel they can't voice opposing opinions, then I think carelessness and arrogance will start to crop up. I sincerely hope the administration avoids this kind of situation.
Takaichi also plans to accelerate defense spending and expand Japan's missile and drone programs. She's taking a tough line against China as well as North Korea in what she sees as the threat they pose to stability in the Asia-Pacific. Observers are watching closely to see whether Japan's leader revises the country's pacifist constitution that's been in place since the end of World War II. Doing so will likely raise tensions with Beijing, and how Takaichi manages her relationship with China may define her foreign policy and Japan's defense posture for years to come. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. A Hong Kong court has sentenced pro-democracy media mogul Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison for national security crimes. Lai was found guilty in December of 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and for publishing seditious materials. The 78-year-old has denied all the charges against him. Venezuela's Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado says armed men have kidnapped a prominent opposition politician, Juan Pablo Juniper, just hours after his release by authorities. The public prosecutor's office confirmed that Juniper was taken into custody for violating the conditions of his release. Thousands of people have gathered across Australia to protest against Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit. Protesters say Herzog is complicit in civilian deaths in Gaza, a claim he denies. One rally in Sydney at the Bondi Attack Memorial turned violent as police hit protesters with pepper spray and arrested at least 15 people. The Seattle Seahawks have beaten the New England Patriots to win this year's Super Bowl. Jason Myers kicked 5 field goals for the Seahawks, which was a Super Bowl record. And Puerto Rican superstar Bad Bunny gave a historic halftime show by performing the entire set in Spanish. President Trump described it as one of the worst ever. Let's get the latest with a showbiz reporter at the Daily Mail, Stephanie Tetchy. Bad Bunny. I know, we've got lots to talk about today. Let's go into Bad Bunny. Super Bowl halftime show. It's causing controversy. Trump was definitely not impressed. Why?
Well, you know what, in my personal opinion, Leanne, Bad Bunny was far from bad on stage yesterday, but it's clearly evident there is no love lost between Bad Bunny and Donald Trump. From the time that Bad Bunny was announced as the headliner for the Super Bowl, there drew a lot of criticism, especially from Donald Trump, who said he would not be watching the show, but clearly curiosity got the best of him last night as he did tune in. And he said, as you said, it was absolutely terrible. He said this was an affront to America. It didn't represent the standards of creativity, excellency that America is supposed to show. He ripped it apart, including with the dances. He said the dancing was terrible. And then the icing on the cake from Donald Trump about his performance, Bad Bunny's performance, was that it was all in Spanish. He said, I didn't understand what he was saying. I don't think this is a thought that has been kind of supported by lots of people, both critics and fans alike. I think those 13 minutes of Bad Bunny's performance has gone down a storm. It's made history, and it's come at a time where America is divided but needs some unity. And for some people, this Super Bowl performance did it.
I must say, Stephanie, Bad Bunny's entire show, as you just said, was in Spanish. I watched it, didn't understand a word, but doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. Let's be honest with each other. I don't speak any Spanish. But despite Donald Trump's intense criticism, as he said he wasn't going to watch it, clearly tuned in, many celebrities have actually praised his performance. Who was saying what and coming out in his defense?
Oh, there has been so many stars, even beforehand, Leanne, that were just so honoured and in support of Bad Bunny's performance. One of them was J-Lo, who says that she was left emotional by the performance. Of course, Bad Bunny joined her at her performance back in 2020, and she said it's been an honour to see that new people are going to get to know him. A fellow person who's also taken to the stage at the Super Bowl is Katy Perry, and she said, you know, he's shown what the real American dream looks like. And then also his fellow Latino star Ricky Martin says that, you know, he knew that the pressure would be on Bad Bunny to deliver. And he says, you know, there's always that problem of staying true to your heritage, which he feels that Bad Bunny done with this performance. So online, on social media, everyone has given Bad Bunny the thumbs up. He truly did make history last night.
I must say, I didn't know who Bad Bunny was until pretty much the Super Bowl performance. I'm not really in the rap category anymore, I must say. Old school, yes. New school, no. But let's talk about the average Super Bowl, Stephanie. Halftime show pulls in around 127 million viewers. How many people tuned in to get a watch of Bad Bunny? Because let's be honest, Turning Points USA held their very own show with Kid Rock because they weren't happy about Bad Bunny being chosen to do that halftime show.
I was quite surprised about that. Actually, that Turning Point went that step further to make sure that there was going to be an alternative to Bad Bunny's show. So they managed to draw in 6 million viewers to watch Kid Rock's performance for Turning Point, which obviously is the organisation that was dedicated to Charlie, founded by Charlie Kirk. But for Bad Bunny's performance, at the moment, the tallies are still coming in, but he's surpassed well over 100 million viewers last night. Last year, when Kendrick Lamar was performing, it was 133 million. So I can imagine by tomorrow, by the figures that come out, it will well surpass that. This was one of the most controversial and talked about performances that we've had in a while for Super Bowl. So as well, some people can watch it back on YouTube. So I think he's probably done really well when it comes to hits, both streaming and watching it in traditional TV.
And Lady Gaga made a surprise appearance, but many of Bad Bunny's fans are criticising the rapper for not featuring a Latin performer. Why didn't Cardi B sing? Maybe I would have chosen Shakira. Not sure.
Yeah, I would have gone for Shakira too, totally. I would have liked to see her on stage because she is unapologetically Latino. But I do think that the criticism is a bit blown over proportion because you did have Cardi B there. He was in the crowd in the performance on stage. We had Pedro Pascal. We had Jessica Alba. So the Latino turnout was strong. Cardi B has previously been offered to perform at the Super Bowl and she declined it. She says she hasn't had enough hits in her career. She doesn't feel ready to do that. So I can imagine if they did give Cardi B the chance to do it, she probably would have said no. And Lady Gaga is a very big name, and also she done a Latino version of her track "Die Before My Smile." So I think the Latino flavor was there. And I think from start to finish, in the whole 13 minutes of this performance, you cannot deny that it was quintessentially Latino.
And I'm out of time. I'm not allowed to ask you this question, but I'm going to. Just a quick thought. Was the wedding during the halftime show real? I wanted to know that. Do you think that those two people really got married?
Leanne, it was so real. Can you imagine getting married at the Super Bowl? But one thing which is going to drive a lot of people crazy, they're not revealing the names of the pair who got married. So that's why a lot of people thought it was fake. But apparently they are dear friends of Bad Bunny, and he invited them to get married on one of his biggest moments of his career.
Absolutely fabulous. I like the wedding part. Stephanie Tecci, as always, thank you so much. A reminder of our top stories. The Prince and Princess of Wales break their silence on the latest revelations from the Epstein files. Tech giants attend a landmark social media trial over addiction claims. And the Seattle Seahawks win this year's Super Bowl as Puerto Rican star Bad Bunny performs a historic halftime show entirely in Spanish. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.